How's that, Howard?
That's good.
Work?
Yeah, beautiful.
So, normally I'm a wild thing up here. I'd be going back and forth, but I promised Howard I'd behave myself and stay put behind the microphone. I am really happy to be here. Thrilled. Thank you for inviting me, Howard. And I've been spending some time over the past couple of weeks trying to think of what I might say about sustainability that might sound erudite. But then I remembered I'm with Carter and Margaret, and they can be erudite for me. So I can just stand up here and let it fly. Thank you both, Carter and Margaret, for all you do, and both in your writing and for the community. Thank you both. I appreciate it. So I'm a scientist, and I really love a lot of what science has taught us and what it might continue to teach us. But science is not going to save the world. It will not. It can't lead us into anything that we might envision as a sustainable future. And to set that up, I wanted to read a short piece, not mine, by the inimitable Ursula Le Guin. And this is an essay that she wrote as a foreword to a book by Murray Bookchin, the late Murray Bookchin, The Next Revolution, Popular Assemblies and the Promise of Direct Democracy. What all political and social thinking has finally been forced to face is, of course, the irreversible degradation of the environment by unrestrained capitalism. And this is important, the enormous fact of which science has been trying for 50 years to convince us, while technology provided us ever greater distractions from it. Every benefit industrialism and capitalism have brought us, every wonderful advance in knowledge and health and communication and comfort casts the same fatal shadow. All we have taken from this earth, and taking with ever-increasing speed and greed, we now return little but what is sterile or poisoned. Yet, we can't stop the process. A capitalist economy, by definition, lives by growth. We have, essentially, chosen cancer as the model of our social system. Ursula, you rock. So that kind of sets it up, and it was important what she had to say about science not being able to convince us. Science is failing to convince us, not because the scientific method is necessarily flawed, although I could go into a long critique on that, but it's because science operates without empathy. Scientists have empathy, but science does not. Okay, so you aren't going to go to the pages of Nature or Genes, Genomes, and Genetics or Science to find anything that's going to save the world that you would hand off to your friends to support the idea of sustainability. There's no empathy there. It's voiceless. And so we've, for a long time, been in this process of erecting partitions between ourselves and each other, and also the biosphere. How many times do you read about the environment as it was something out there and separate from us? And we behave as though we are separate, as though we could even be alive were it not for the rest of the world around us. And so I believe that we need stories to break down those partitions that we've erected by building the deepest level of empathy for other people and for the biosphere than you can really possibly imagine. And I just wanted to read one more short piece. This is how Gretel Ehrlich has put it, and this is a recent article in Harper's called Rotten Ice. This is the last paragraph. We have to stop pretending that there is a way back to the lush, comfortable interglacial paradise we have left behind so hurriedly in the 20th century. There are no rules for living on this planet, only consequences. What is needed is an open exchange in which sentience shapes the eye and mind and results in ever-deepening empathy. Beauty and blood, and what Ralph Waldo Emerson called strange sympathies with otherness would circulate freely in us, And the songs of the bearded seals, ululating mating call, the crack and groan of ancient ice, the Arctic tern's cry, and the robin's evensong would inhabit our vocal cords. Thank you, Greta. That was a terrific article. I highly recommend it. So what am I all about? Well, I believe stories can save the world. And I believe that happens, again, by building the kind of empathy that Gretel talks about. And so what I'm all about is trying to bring my science and my kind of collective consciousness, both as a scientist but also as a fourth-generation Oregonian that's really pretty deeply connected to this place, and a forager and a gardener, all together into a single voice. That's what I really want to do. And I get really happy when I'm poking around in that gray zone between metaphorical and lyrical, or literal, because nothing is separate from anything else. Nothing is. So here's a short essay that I wrote right after I returned from the Boston Marathon in 2013. I ran that marathon. And it kind of gets to the heart of what I need to say this afternoon, even though I can't imagine anything less sustainable than getting on a jet and flying to Boston and running a marathon in more ways than you could possibly imagine. Is that not sustainable? This is called Beyond Boston. Responsibility comes to us in many forms. Often our obligations are planned and long-term, such as child rearing. Other times, duty is foisted upon us in a flash. In April 2013, I chose to run the Boston Marathon, and responsibility came to me in two echoing booms as I sprawled on early spring grass, exhausted, depleted, and happy, only 2 blocks from the finish, where flying shrapnel killed 3, maimed hundreds, and wounded the spirits of thousands. Anger, outrage, and sorrow always follow the tumultuous chaos of mass trauma. Then everyone trots out their favorite agenda, political or moral or religious or some combination of any of them. Let's be clear, I have an agenda too. Although my felt responsibility to the Boston bombings could be called many things, a worldview, a belief system, or perhaps even an hypothesis. Simply stated, I believe that for us to be whole people, we need to be physically, emotionally, and spiritually connected to our place in as many ways and as deeply as possible, through the people and the landscape and all the other living things with whom we share our space. This idea is neither new nor radical. The simplicity espoused by Henry David Thoreau, although Leopold's challenge of environmental stewardship as moral responsibility, and the writings of a multitude of other environmental philosophers are reactions to human self-centered profligacy and subjugation of nature. Their ideas resonate with us today because today and on all our other days, we sit, stand, and walk at the end point of a few million years of human evolution that has cemented into our chromosomes a desire for belonging, to be with other people, functioning together within a place that meets our needs. The current estrangement between people and the natural world likely began in earnest only in the last 10,000 years or so of civilized history, when many of our ancestors parted ways with the tribal hunter-gatherer lifestyle that had sustained humanity and its predecessors for eons. In this new world, constructed of concrete and crammed with people living as isolated individuals in competition with one another, we now have a recipe for despair. A dysfunctional state that can fuel the occasional sociopathic outburst in a few folks who exist at the frayed edges of the overstretched social fabric. Stretched too far? Yes. But not everything has been torn asunder. Ripped cloth can be mended. This is why I love the word connected. The double-click feel of it in my mouth, the sound of something locking in, buckling up, held firmly in place, the sound of safety. Disconnected, the antonym, is the word that haunted me after Boston 2013, stuck like an irritating grass seed in the folds of my gray matter, severed, detached, disengaged, adrift, lost. Disconnected is one of the media adjectives used to describe Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the bomber killed by police in days following the marathon. Eugene author, high school teacher, and former troubled teen Peter Hoffmeister addressed the catastrophe of mass shootings in a piece called On School Shooters. The Huffington Post doesn't want you to read this. And he reminded us that shooters are often addicted to violent video games rather than fly fishing or rock climbing, and that developing a connection with nature might be a palliative for dysfunctional, misfit kids. I couldn't agree more, and would extend his thesis to say that a profound reconnection with our place might be a palliative for a dysfunctional, misfit society. Would a person who knows the evening rise of sulfur duns over darkening water, or the candy smell of cottonwood leaves in spring, or the deep red of a spotted towhee's eye, or the rising spiral call of a Swainson's thrush, or the voluptuous pink nod of calypso orchids, or the feel of bean seeds pushed into warm May soil, or the tribal connectedness of other people who also know these things? Would such a person also fill up a pressure cooker with black powder and ball bearings and blow it up in a crowd of innocents? Not likely. This worldview might seem a little quaint. You know what I mean. Tom's just a nature geek, noodling on a topic of interest only to other nature geeks. But the implications of connectivity quickly deepen and widen as we ask how and why people should become participants in the wider world. The stitching together of knowledge, of torn cloth, begins with education and experience, and these lead to knowledge. Knowledge becomes awareness, and awareness instills value. We can re-enter the world of the living, even though the separation has been only in our minds. If we choose to follow the moral path laid out by luminaries such as Thoreau and Leopold, then we also have a moral obligation to speak on behalf of nature with the expectation that humanity realign its values with the natural order. Perhaps we could even begin to think of this as progress. As these words find their way into cyberspace, the trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev has entered the sentencing phase. In 2014, I returned with my running tribe for another Boston Marathon. We had the remarkable experience of helping an entire city to heal, and I healed some too. Yet, I still can't face the headlines around this trial. The news makes me sad, the same sadness I felt in 2013 when Tamerlan was killed and Dzhokhar arrested. There was no relief, no vengeance served, only that feeling that my chest might crack open and swallow me in sorrow. What happens to Dzhokhar isn't really the point. Regardless of his sentence, he has no future. The deep and urgent issue is this: are we progressing as a society? Have we broadened our collective imagination to include meaningful connections among people, to the biosphere, to life? At times I wonder if the bombing would have happened with people maimed and dead, and Dzhokhar sitting in a cell at the crossroads of his life that can no longer be a life. If I'd only been able to take he and his brother huckleberry picking on that broad blue day in late summer when there were no huckleberries, and we started home, then stopped to catch dark trout in the pools of a mountain brook tumbling through a dim forest of big fir, older than old. And then I remember their time has passed.
Good piece.
I made it. I read that to Kim this morning and I started crying. I thought, oh man, I'm in trouble. Okay. So, let's see how we're doing. On a lighter note, I like to garden. I love to garden. I love to save seeds. And I just wanted to put in a plug for one of our local seed companies, Adaptive Seeds. I just love what Andrew and Sarah are doing. And I wanted to also mention that they just recently made available a dry bean called the Titus cannellini. And so I brought a little drop here. And that's a dry bean that mom started saving 30 years ago, and I have continued to save it. She's still around too. She's still saving her beans and growing them. They apparently stack up. They're the best out of 5 or 6 cannellinis that Andrew and Sarah tested, and so you can find that there, and you can also find a really beautiful plug for my book. Bless them. They said someone even bought your book and they didn't order any seeds. You know? So this is an excerpt from a chapter from my book, Blackberries in July, and it's called The Smith River Memorial Garden. The chocolate brown earth with bits of green oak stem poking out has an uncomfortable similarity to the logged hillside. Let me just give you a little backstory here that you would have gotten earlier in the chapter. There was a clear cut right next door to us that happened that was a little traumatic. So, similarity to the logged hillside, a crop is planted, grown, and removed. Animals that have colonized the plants are disrupted. A degree of ruthless control over the land is required. I own it. Certainly, these two versions of agriculture are different, especially on temporal and spatial scales. The looming starkness of the hillside encompasses several hundred acres of trees that will not regrow to their previous size in my lifetime. In contrast, my garden is 1,200 square feet, and within 3 months it will be covered with head-high corn and the broad green leaves of spreading squash vines. Yet the critical divergence between these forms of agriculture is this: I always tithe to the soil. Every winter, I haul in trailer loads of fresh horse manure and straw from my friends the Kimmels, forking it into a huge yellow and green heap outside the east fence. This afternoon, the pile is 1/3 its original size, dark brown and crumbly, odorless except for the faint, musty smell of various microbes returning all that poop to the earth. Shoveling the compost into a rusty wheelbarrow, I put my hands to the handles, legs directly beneath, and grunt the load around the corner of the fence and through the gate. 6 trips, 6 mounds for 1 tilled bed. Then I spread and churn it into the top 6 inches of soil with a spading fork. A healthy forest needs no such intervention. Forest soils are built over thousands of years by trees that grow, shed their needles and nitrogen-fixing lichens, and then eventually die and rot in place. I find it difficult to imagine that the large-scale and repeated removal of Douglas fir, hemlock, and red cedar from what once was a self-regenerating system can do anything but deplete that soil. Immediate losses are obvious. They come from winter rain pelting the bare ground, forming muddy runoff that chokes the waterways below. Still, I wouldn't have a garden if this land had not at one time been cleared. When digging my beds, I occasionally turn up intact pieces of bark and black charcoal left from the trees that were felled and the stumps that were burned 2 generations ago. In fact, I wouldn't be here to contemplate my sense of place and a healthy relationship to the land if my great-grandparents hadn't been lured from the Midwest by a piece of Oregon-California railroad land and the vast forests that fueled a booming timber economy in the last century. Confronting the facts of my family history causes me to pause, wipe my brow, take a deep breath, and exhale some self-righteousness. We could all do that on occasion. The sun slides effortlessly into the western sky, stretching the broken shadow of the large apple tree just outside my south fence, downward from the knoll toward Johnny's cabin. No seams begin to bite any patch of exposed skin, so I pull on my long-sleeve work shirt and turn up the collar. The tiny flies still manage to find my ears and a patch of scalp where the back of my hat is open. 2 beds have been finished, but there's no more digging left in my arms, legs, or back. I walk slowly downhill to the pickup. Inside the canopy cover is a plastic grocery bag with 5 varieties of bean seeds and an assortment of scavenged containers. A cottage cheese carton, a jam jar, some repurposed sandwich bags. The beans all came from Mom, who has diligently grown the plants and saved their seed for many years. They came to her from various sources: Swedish browns from Grammy, red kidneys from my cousin Maggie, tongues of fire, yellow eyes, and cannellinis ordered from seed catalogs many winters ago. During the time that Grammy lived with Mom, baskets full of beans were grown so that Grammy could occupy her winters sitting in the living room shelling seeds from dried pods. The beans occupied her hands, made her feel useful. Now Grammy's gone, and there is talk of Mom and Dad moving to Eastern Oregon, which did not happen, where the climate is inhospitable to bean growing. Things change, and the time has come for the next generation of humans to carry the next generation of beans into the future. When seeds are saved from plants that have grown for many years in a single place, the plants and people whom they feed become that place. This plant-human relationship is fundamentally physical. Within a few seasons, the genetic makeup of these crops is already being molded by soil and weather and human choice. For Mom's beans, the strongest plants made more of themselves, and the largest seeds were selected and planted the following year. When surplus beans are eaten, their proteins are dismantled and recomposed into enzymes that activate the myriad chemical reactions that keep our physical cells running, including the firing of our brain cells that become choices that allow the best beans to persist. So, Mom's beans have, in a very direct way, become both her and her place in this bioregion. They will also become part of everyone with whom she shares a handful of seeds, and you're welcome to some. And a simple bean then becomes a fiber in the fabric that binds people to each other and to the land. I drop the beans onto the surface of the 2 beds, the seeds about 4 inches apart, marking the boundaries between each variety with upright sticks, methodically pushing the seeds into fluffy earth with my index finger, smoothing the surface as I go. Now the beans will grow in my hands, a product of Mom's stewardship, a digging tool welded by Dad, the Kimmel horse byproducts, and the peculiar way that the sun, now gliding to roost below the bare western ridge, shines on this ground. Returning to the Johnny Gunter cabin, I take up my customary post on the front porch to listen to the land become dark and to think. A chorus of Swainson's thrushes calls into the dusk in a series of ascending warbles spiraling upward on invisible evening drafts, interspersed with short tweets rising hopefully at the end. Growing darkness silences the bird songs one at a time, until only a single thrush calls from the black conifers below the cabin. That odd shiver runs down my spine, energy that is released when everything is right. Although I'm trained as a scientist, I wonder if we place too much stock in science to tell us how we should feel. Seeing a multidimensional landscape reduced to flat barrenness is emotionally jarring. I don't understand why this is so, but I've come to believe that my emotions are worth paying attention to, despite their subjectivity. Do we have some innate template that is the basis for recognizing the tolerances of ecological acceptability? One could speculate that our survival over the vast reaches of history preceding civilization would have depended on such ecological intuition. Or do we resonate with the natural world when it reflects a vibrant state within ourselves? We thrive on depth, deep soil, deep shadows, deep connections to people and places. All of these produce intricate, interwoven, interdependent pieces of our personal ecology. Certainly this much is true. A forest that has been reduced to 2 dimensions will heal by tending naturally toward complexity. People heal that way too. Thank you.